Welcome to Threads of Truth, where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation. Today, we are walking through a case that really, I think, defines the true meaning of a cold trail. We're talking about the disappearance of Maura Murray back in February of 2004. For 2 decades, this story, it's a sudden, completely inexplicable vanishing act from a very clear location. It has just resisted any kind of resolution.
It really has.
We're going to explore the sources that lay out the facts, the highly unusual preparation, and that agonizingly tight window that sealed her fate, whatever that fate may be.
It is a mystery built entirely on paradox. It's straight. We know exactly where Maura Murray's car was.
Exactly.
Who was disabled on Route 112 in remote Woodsville, New Hampshire. We even have a clear time, around 7:27 p.m. But despite having this, this definitive starting point, the trail just vanished.
Yeah.
Completely, within minutes.
And she was a 21-year-old UMass nursing student, clearly under immense pressure, who executed what looks like a prepared exit, only to have it all derailed by a car crash. It just leaves us with this forensic puzzle of unparalleled frustration.
Absolutely. And that's what keeps people coming back.
It is. The enduring fascination. It comes from that empty Saturn sedan, headlights maybe still shining into the snowbank. It suggests urgency and panic, yet everything leading up to that moment points to careful, almost calculated planning.
Right.
We're going to examine the evidence that has been retested, the ground that has been searched with radar, and all the clues that have been just relentlessly debated online. Try and understand what happened in that brief, dark slice of time.
And that leads us right to the mystery's most unique legacy, its online presence. This case, you have to remember, it predates the whole true crime documentary boom. What are the foundational internet mysteries? The scarcity of official information back in 2004 created this vacuum, and thousands of citizen sleuths just rushed in to fill it. And that led to this massive, often contradictory, community-driven investigation that, it continues to this day.
So we're here to try and extract the most salient facts from that huge, sometimes overwhelming body of source material.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's unpack this timeline. We can't start at the crash. We just can't. We have to begin with the week before February 9th because the sources, they paint a very clear picture of a young woman under just extraordinary emotional duress, moving towards some kind of planned action.
Yeah, that's the right place to start. All the sources confirm Maura was a junior nursing student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. And, that career path itself, it demands really high academic and emotional rigor.
Sure.
But in the weeks right before she disappeared, she's dealing with all these compounding stressors. It just seemed to overload her system.
And that pressure included what? Her grades, academic performance, concerns over money, and then crucially, this acute family incident just the week before her grandfather passed away.
Right.
And then only 4 days before she disappeared, she was in a pretty serious car accident near campus where she crashed her father's Saturn.
The very same thing.
The exact same car she would abandon later. She crashed it into a guardrail.
And the fallout from that first crash is, I think, essential context. Her father, Fred Murray, he drove up from Massachusetts to handle the insurance reporting. And sources suggest this brought on a lot of financial and maybe even disciplinary pressure onto Maura.
Right.
There were also some rumors of disciplinary issues at UMass floating around, and it just created this environment where escape, even just a temporary one, would have seemed highly appealing. The stage was really set for some kind of a break, impulsive yet prepared.
And when we look at the day of the disappearance, February 9, 2004, her actions, they really shift from just being stressed to actively preparing for, an extended absence. This is where the narrative becomes truly bizarre.
It just screams intent. We can identify at least 5 major actions Maura took that day that they defy the idea of a simple, spontaneous drive to clear her head.
Yeah.
These actions, they strongly suggest she was crafting a narrative to buy herself some time.
The first one, and you could argue it's the most calculated move, was her communication strategy, or I guess her lack of one.
Exactly. She sent out these identical false emails. One went to her professors, another went to her supervisor at the art gallery where she worked, and the message was very explicit. She claimed a family emergency, and she specifically referenced a death in the family.
Which was a lie. Her grandfather had passed away the week prior, but this was a new fabricated emergency.
A complete fabrication. And she stated she'd be out of contact for a week. Now, what that does is it buys her a 7-day head start before any institution school work would flag her absence as truly suspicious. That is critical premeditation.
And that was backed up by what she did with her money.
Yes. She went to an ATM and she withdrew $280 in cash. Now, our sources indicate this was almost every single cent she had available in her bank account at the time.
Wow.
So if this was just a weekend trip, why drain the account? It suggests a trip that would last longer, or more importantly, one where she needed to operate entirely outside of the digital financial grid, off the books.
Which brings us to supplies. It wasn't just that she gathered things for travel. She made a very specific and kind of telling stop at a liquor store.
Right. She spent about $40 on alcohol. She bought Bailey's, Kahlua, and vodka. Now, for one person planning a quiet escape, that's a substantial purchase.
It is.
It suggests an intent for heavy drinking. Or maybe the purchase was for 2 or more people. Or for a trip that was going to last more than just a weekend. The fact that she bought mixers and hard liquor, it adds another layer to her mindset. Was this about self-medication, or was this for a rendezvous? We don't know.
And she packed the essentials, right?
Right.
A duffel bag, a backpack, and kind of critically some college books. But what she left behind is what forensic investigators call negative evidence. The things that weren't there that should have been.
Oh, yeah. The items left behind are probably the clearest indicators of her desire to vanish without a trace. Her cell phone.
The big one.
The big one. All her credit cards and her remaining bank funds were all still in her dorm room. By leaving the cell phone, she ensured no ping data, no call logs, no immediate electronic tracking. Leaving the credit cards confirmed her determination to avoid a paper trail. It's a textbook move for someone seeking complete anonymity.
So the only person she gave any kind of explanation to was her boyfriend, Bill Rausch, and even that was incredibly vague. She just said she was driving to a cabin nearby to get away, but gave absolutely no location. So you have this highly prepared individual driving north, destination completely unknown, and then the plan, whatever it was, it just collapses.
And we know from the sources the car contained a map, specifically a map of New Hampshire and Vermont. This points to the White Mountains, or maybe the border regions, which explains why she ended up on Route 112. It's a remote 2-lane highway known for sharp bends and really deep winter conditions.
And around 7:27 p.m., the timeline just shifts from this quiet preparation to, well, chaotic crisis. She crashes the Saturn sedan on a sharp, unlit corner in Woodsville, which is part of Haverhill, New Hampshire. The car is badly disabled, stuck deep in a snowbank, and it had sustained significant front-end damage.
Right, a cracked windshield and deployed airbags. And the deployed airbags are crucial. This was not a minor fender bender. She would have been physically shaken, probably injured, and certainly disoriented. And this environment, total darkness, sub-phasing temperatures, the shock, it immediately compromised any planned course of action she had.
And this brings us to the vanishing window, which is just frighteningly narrow. A man named Arthur Butch Atwood, a local school bus driver who lived just 100 yards down the road, he saw the damaged car almost immediately and stopped. He is the last confirmed person to speak to Maura Murray.
Atwood's testimony is the absolute linchpin of the entire case. He stops, he sees Maura, who he says is visibly shaken but doesn't appear to be grievously injured, and he offers to call the police. And this is the moment of critical deception.
Yep.
Despite having abandoned her cell phone in her dorm, Maura refused his help. She claimed she'd already called AAA.
That claim, the AAA lie, it's one of the deepest points of analysis in this entire case. It suggests an immediate, urgent need to avoid any official interaction. Why?
Well, there are a few possibilities that are supported by the circumstances. One, fear of a DUI.
Of course.
She had just purchased a significant amount of alcohol. A DUI conviction would almost certainly end her nursing career. Two, was she meeting someone who she didn't want the authorities or even Atwood to see? Or three, was she just panicking and the lie was a reflex to get this good Samaritan to just move on so she could execute the next part of her escape?
Atwood, he took her at her word, but being a responsible citizen, he drove home literally 100 yards and called the police anyway. He places that call at 7:43 p.m.
And this is the agonizing gap. Police arrive at 7:46 p.m. We're talking about 13 to 19 minutes maximum between the last interaction with Atwood and the police finding the empty car. In those few minutes, Maura Murray disappeared entirely.
So let's look at the car itself. When police got there, what physical clues did they find that complicated the scene?
Well, they found the partially consumed alcohol, the open liquor bottles, which adds weight to that DUI avoidance theory. They found the map, suggesting a planned journey. And of course, the most unusual piece of physical evidence, a towel or some kind of cloth material stuffed into the tailpipe of the Saturn.
The towel and the muffler. This one detail drives more online debate than probably any other single clue. From an automotive standpoint, what does that action even achieve? What are the theories?
From a practical standpoint, stuffing a towel into an exhaust pipe it's counterproductive. If you manage to block the exhaust completely, the engine will just die, or at the very least, it'll run extremely poorly. It wouldn't warm the car, wouldn't help restart it. So theories, they abound.
Okay, lay out the main possibilities for it.
One theory is that she was simply cold and desperate, maybe trying to use heat from the engine to warm the towel, just a naive attempt that failed. Another, more technical theory suggests she was trying to silence the car. Maybe she needed to keep the engine running for a bit, but didn't want the sound attracting attention from the road. Pretty far-fetched, but it's entertained by some online sleuths. And then there's a third, darker theory, often raised by those who lean toward foul play, which is that the towel was placed there by someone else. Maybe to disable the vehicle further, or just to create a confusing scene. But honestly, the simplest explanation, given her panic state, is that it was an act of frustrated, misguided effort to fix the car before she just gave up.
The fact remains, she didn't just walk away from a disabled car. She walked away from a crash site where help was demonstrably on the way, confirming she wanted to avoid authorities, and she took key items with her.
Yes. The missing items, they solidify that notion of continued action. The keys to the Saturn were gone, which suggests she didn't plan on coming back to it. And the duffel bag, her survival kit, with the cash, liquor, clothes, was also missing.
So she didn't just flee in a panic.
No. The loss of these items, it kind of rules out the possibility that she just fled in shock and left everything behind. She made a conscious decision to travel light, but prepared.
So this case breakdown, it leaves us with a high degree of certainty about the preparation and an almost complete lack of certainty about the critical 10 to 20 minutes that followed the crash.
Exactly. It's the perfect storm, calculated intent meeting unavoidable circumstance, leading to just instantaneous chaos.
The inherent ambiguity of the Maura Murray case, especially that tiny window of time on Route 112, is precisely why it became such a massive true crime landmark online. The lack of concrete police findings, it allowed the public to feel like they were on equal footing with the investigators.
Oh, absolutely. It was an information vacuum at the very dawn of mass digital communication. In 2004, the police weren't, tweeting out updates. They weren't releasing frequent detailed press releases.
I know.
And this allowed amateur analysts to just swarm the limited data that was available. The police report the crash photos, witness statements, and create this collaborative yet often contradictory narrative. This case really helped establish the template for modern citizen-led investigations.
So let's break down the three dominant theories that were fueled by these online communities. Let's start with major theory A, voluntary disappearance, the planned escape.
This theory, it draws all its strength from the premeditation we just discussed. You get the cash withdrawal, the false emails buying her a week of time, the packed duffel bag, and the intentional abandonment of all tracking devices, cell phone and credit cards.
So the believers in this theory, they argue the crash was just an inconvenience, a bump in the road, literally.
Precisely. They argue she was already planning to meet someone, maybe an acquaintance in Canada or Vermont, or maybe she was just seeking a fresh start, and the crash forced her to continue on foot until she reached her rendezvous point. The motive here is purely internal, escaping this overwhelming emotional and professional pressure.
And didn't sources mention computer searches?
They did. Sources mentioned searches for accommodations on her computer, which supports the idea that she was looking for some kind of pre-planned haven.
But the challenge to this voluntary escape theory is immense, isn't it? Primarily because of the physical environment she was in.
It is. It's a huge challenge. Can a young woman, potentially intoxicated, certainly shaken from a crash, travel very far in sub-freezing temperatures on a dark, remote road, carrying a duffel bag, all without leaving definitive tracks or needing emergency aid? If she successfully ran away, She executed a flawless escape from a scene of chaos into hostile terrain. That's a near impossible feat without specialized training or immediate waiting assistance.
And that leads us right into major theory B, foul play or abduction. This one relies almost entirely on the constraints of that 10-minute window.
Right. The core argument here is that the timeline is just too tight for solo survival or travel. She couldn't have walked very far before the police arrived. Therefore, she must have accepted a ride from someone, and that someone had harmful intentions. This theory leverages the terrifying possibility that she was just unlucky. She ran into an opportunistic predator on that remote stretch of highway.
And this is where we have to examine those peripheral witness accounts that really fuel this narrative, specifically the hiker sighting.
The hiker is a critical, though frustratingly vague, piece of the puzzle. A separate witness reportedly saw a vehicle with its lights on, parked near the scene, and they observed an unidentified man smoking a cigarette near the crash site around the relevant time.
So if this man was waiting or just happened upon the scene,
He represents the immediate source of the abduction possibility. He's someone Maura could have accepted a ride from in a moment of panic.
but the sources also contain the truck sighting, which is, it's temporarily detached from the event, right? What's the significance there?
The truck sighting is much more ambiguous. A few days after the disappearance, a different witness claimed to have seen a dark pickup truck with a red light on top parked in the vicinity. It could belong to a local property owner, a resident, anyone. But online sleuths sometimes use this to weave a narrative of local involvement. They suggest someone familiar with the area, or maybe someone monitoring the crash site may have been involved in foul play. But because this sighting isn't contemporaneous with her vanishing, its relevance is highly debatable. It often just falls prey to speculation.
The great fear, I think, with the abduction theory is that it negates all her preparation, all that planning, the cash, the emails. It all becomes meaningless because of one random, terrible encounter.
It makes the tragedy even deeper, yes. It shifts her fate from being controlled by her own choices to being entirely determined by a terrifying chance encounter.
Finally, we have to look at major theory C, accident and misadventure. It's the simplest, maybe the most probable, but it's also the least satisfying narrative.
And that's why so many people resist it. This theory posits that the crash completely derailed any escape attempts she had planned. Maura, possibly intoxicated from the liquor she bought, certainly disoriented from the airbags, made a critical, panicked error. She simply wandered off the road and succumbed to the elements.
Hypothermia? The environment supports this heavily. Route 112 is right next to dense, unforgiving woods, especially in February. The Swift River runs nearby, and temperatures were well below freezing.
Right.
Hypothermia can set in very quickly, and it often causes victims to, paradoxically, remove their clothing because they feel like they're burning up. That's a key reason why remains can sometimes be hard to find.
But here's the major contradiction that makes online communities resist this theory so fiercely.
Yeah.
The complete, absolute lack of discovered remains. 2 decades of searches involving professional search and rescue teams, specialized dogs, modern radar, they have yielded nothing.
Nothing.
If she succumbed within a few miles, why has not a single trace of her clothing, the duffel bag, or her remains ever surfaced? This lack of definitive physical evidence, it keeps the door wide open for the other, more dramatic theories to thrive.
It's fascinating how the amateur digital sleuths handle this lack of data. They seem to filter every single piece of evidence through their own preferred lens.
They do. If you look at the subreddits and the forums, the analysis of call logs, these minute discrepancies in police arrival times, the interpretation of her father's actions, it's all highly polarized. The initial facts, the stress, the alcohol, the remoteness, they're constant, but the interpretive weight placed on each one varies wildly. And this is how the mystery metastasizes. It just feeds off the ambiguity, giving every theory a chance to thrive.
And because the official investigation has never produced that conclusive smoking gun, the internet maintains this persistent belief that the answer must be hidden in the public records they're scrutinizing, not lost in the woods.
Precisely. They believe the police miffed a detail, not that the answer is inaccessible or simply inconclusive. And that cultural phenomenon is just vital to understanding the legacy of Maura Murray.
Moving into a more critical analysis, it's clear why the narratives that involve agency, the planned escape or the violent abduction, persist so strongly. They're dramatically satisfying. They give us a clear beginning, middle, and an end, even if that end is tragic. But the truth might be far more anticlimactic, and that seems to be a hard pill for the public to swallow.
Well, that's a fundamental psychological truth about cold cases, isn't it? The human mind seeks closure. And an unsolved case, especially one with such high preparation, leading to such a chaotic end, it resists that narrative closure.
Yeah.
So when a planned escape narrative fizzles out, or when a simple misadventure yields no body, people actively create a more complex, more satisfying story, whether it involves local bad actors, a grand escape to Canada, or even a government conspiracy. And these narratives, they're almost always fueled by confirmation bias.
Can you explain how confirmation bias fundamentally shapes the efforts of the digital sleuths in this specific case?
Sure. If a digital investigator starts with the hypothesis that Maura was abducted, they will inevitably spend 90% of their time seeking corroboration for the hiker sighting or dissecting police response times, looking for evidence of local criminal activity.
Right. They're looking for their suspect.
Exactly. They are far less likely to neutrally analyze the freezing temperatures or the difficulty of traversing that environment in February, which actually supports the misadventure theory. Conversely, those who are focused on the escape theory will endlessly dissect her computer searches and financial movements, and they'll minimize the chaotic impact of the crash itself. This bias, it leads to selective amplification of data, and it prevents a unified theory from ever really emerging.
So let's discuss the physical investigation. The New Hampshire State Police still classify this as an active case. What have the modern investigative techniques, the ground-penetrating radar, the DNA testing, the property excavations, what have they actually yielded?
Well, the sources confirm it's a continued active investigation. It's primarily focused on the Route 112 corridor and the surrounding private properties, and it's often based on specific tips or areas of interest identified by, say, cadaver dogs.
And the ground-penetrating radar, the GPR?
EPR is essential here because it detects anomalies beneath the surface. It can rule out or confirm shallow grave sites, concrete slabs that might be covering something, or other buried items. And the frequent searches, especially on properties associated with potential local suspects, they've helped rule out dozens of areas.
So GPR has mostly functioned as an exclusionary tool then. It tells us where she isn't.
Precisely. The searches have provided clarity on where she is not, which is valuable, but they haven't provided that breakthrough of locating remains or any critical physical evidence. The lack of discovery, despite all this advanced technology, remains the greatest obstacle to resolution for both investigators and the online communities.
And what about the renewed DNA testing? Where is the forensic focus there?
Modern forensics, they allow for much smaller samples to yield results. So investigators have focused on items recovered from the Saturn-specific stains, a hair sample found inside, and, crucially, the liquor bottles that were left behind.
Right.
If she was with someone, or if she was handled by an assailant, residual DNA evidence, even 2 decades old, could theoretically provide a link. However, the outcome of these retests has not been publicly released as a definitive breakthrough. It's just a slow, methodical effort to utilize 21st century tools on 20th century evidence.
Let's focus on the remaining critical questions then. The elements that, if we knew the answer, would solve the case instantly. The first has to be her true destination.
Oh, absolutely. If we knew her true destination, the entire case framework shifts. Was the plan to meet someone? Was it a job interview? Was it a predetermined cabin she rented online? The vagueness she gave to Bill Rausch about a cabin and the confirmed map of New Hampshire and Vermont. It all suggests a general regional goal. But without a specific address or contact, investigators have a nearly infinite search radius. It just stretches through that whole wilderness region north of the crash site.
And the puzzle of the towel and the muffler. Was it an act of frustration or an act of calculated concealment?
If we could definitively determine the purpose of that towel, it would reveal her emotional state and her immediate intent. If she was trying to silence the engine, it suggests a need for stealth, maybe to evade Atwood or wait for a contact. If it was just desperation, it confirms a panicked, solo state. It is such a small physical clue that carries massive psychological weight.
Finally, maybe the most compelling piece of contradictory behavior. Why did she decline Atwood's help by claiming she'd called AAA when she had left her cell phone behind and was physically unable to call anyone?
This specific demonstrable lie is the moment the case pivots from just an accident to truly suspicious circumstances. The lie suggests a strong, immediate, specific motivation to avoid interaction.
Right.
If it was fear of a DUI, why leave the car and risk freezing to death? If it was to meet someone, where was that person? This act of deception is the strongest argument that she was either fearing arrest or protecting someone who was nearby, someone she did not want Atwood or the police to see. It's the 3-minute lie that launched a 20-year mystery.
And the New Hampshire State Police are clear. This remains an active missing person case involving suspicious circumstances. They are acknowledging that this vanishing was not accidental in the conventional sense.
It just underscores the enduring challenge, the facts. They support multiple conflicting narratives simultaneously. And until a piece of definitive physical evidence emerges, or someone breaks a long-held silence, we're just left to endlessly dissect the actions of a highly stressed student in the moments before she vanished into the cold night air.
Maura Murray's story is a haunting demonstration of how quickly a life can become a legend, trapped in that narrow, unforgiving slice of time on Route 112. The planning, the panic, the lie to Atwood, it all culminates in a silence that has just refused to be broken.
It is a profound frustration for anyone who follows this case. And, as we conclude our exploration, consider this. If Maura Murray had crashed her car today, in the era of ubiquitous smartphones, high-definition private security systems, and mandatory vehicle GPS, what single technological advancement beyond what we discussed would have instantly solved this entire mystery? It forces us to appreciate just how isolated and digitally untracked the world still was back in 2004.
A compelling question indeed. Thank you for exploring this impossible vanishing act with us.
My pleasure, as always.
Join us next time on Threads of Truth, where we will examine the disappearance of Eaton Patz, the boy whose case fundamentally changed the way America searches for the missing.